Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Poets in Pajamas reading series. My name is Leah Silvieus, and I'll be reading tonight. I'm just going to give folks a few minutes to join us here. I am coming to you from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. In addition to being a poet, I work as a chief stewardess on a 109-foot private yacht that's based half of the year down here in Fort Lauderdale and half of the year up in Sag Harbor, New York. So this is kind of our winter home base. Right now it is spring break. It's been spring break since March 1st, and it'll probably be spring break into April. So it's really busy down here. Traffic is awful, but folks seem to be having a good time, so that's good. I hope if you're on spring break, you're having a good time and you're being safe. I just have to say that, having lived in Fort Lauderdale for a while and seeing what's been going on. I am the author of a couple chapbooks that I'm going to read from tonight. The first one is Anemochory from Hyacinth Girl Press. I know the light's a little bright, so I'm going to try to angle it here. And the second one is Season of Dares from Bull City Press. And then I have my first full-length book is coming out from Sundress Publications later this month, actually. We're aiming for a release date at AWP. The title of that is Arabilis. I'm really excited about that. That book has been in progress for probably about 10 years. So I'm excited to get it out in the world. I wish I had a copy here, but I shall just have to go to the Sundress Publications website or come find me at AWP. I'll be doing a lot of events. I have a signing at Bull City Press, one at Sundress Publications. I'm also doing a reading with Eco Theo Journal, and what else? There's another one that I can't remember. I'm also doing a panel with some other adoptee women poets on Saturday. So if you're at AWP, I guess it's next week. Come find me and say hi. No, wait, just another minute, I think. I see people are joining, but I'm always late to these things, so I want to give people a chance to drop in. See, my mom's joined. Rachel, I see you. Hello, Rachel. Rachel Gray was my freshman. Well, I guess we had single rooms, so she wasn't my freshman roommate in college, but we were best friends in college. She's also a great poet. You should check out her work. Rachel Gray. She has some amazing poems out there. Hi, Mom. I see you. All right, I think I'm going to get started. So I said I'm going to start out reading from Anemochory, my first chapbook from Hyacinth Girl Press. I just have to say a couple of things about my presses because I love them all. They're all amazing. All of the books from Hyacinth Girl Press are hand-bound by Margaret Bashar, the editor who lives in Pittsburgh. They're beautiful books. The cover art for my book was made by a Kansas-based artist named Yoon Mi Nam. She's a sculptor, she does printmaking, a lot of amazing work. So I found this image on her website and I just loved it. So I asked her if she'd let me use it, and she did. So what should I say about this book? This book, I think, really came out of some questions I was thinking about dealing with grief and loss. As I was writing these poems, over the couple years I started writing these poems, I had two people in my life pass away. One was a high school friend, and the other one was a friend and a colleague I taught with when I was teaching with a Fulbright program in South Korea. And so I was dealing with a lot of grief at the time, and then just these questions of what to do and how to feel after the funerals were over, after all of the people who had traveled to these events went home. What are we left with in the wake of grief? Where do we go from there? So those were some of the central questions I was thinking about as I was working through these poems. The first poem I'm going to read is called Water Street Elegy. O Potomac, O dirty, O constant reviser, how sky forgets, scours even our eulogies back to water, back to muck, to dirt. Flotsam, whiskey flask, water bird, lilt alike on river's filthy curl. Bones quiet under elm's ignorant shimmer. June nods yes. Summer keeps on walking. Anemochory, balloon, wing, plume. The world loves still to give, despite itself, its grief. This is the poem that the title of this book came from. Anemochory is a term that's used to describe the dispersal of seeds by the wind. So the next poem is Obad Before Storm. And just a note about this poem, as I was working on this poem, I began working as a yacht stewardess. It was my first time really on boats of any kind that were not on lakes or rivers. And so we were coming down from New York that fall, and we were stopped in North Carolina because there was a hurricane coming. So we had to pull off into a safe place while the storm passed. And so we got in, we tied up, we got everything ready, but the day was just still as beautiful as it could be. The sun was shining, hardly a cloud in the sky, everybody was out on the beaches, and I found it very hard to believe that there was a storm that was coming, but the captain, who was my then boyfriend, now husband, remarked that about midday he could sense the shift in the wind, that there was a slight chill to it, and he could just sense that the storm was on its way. And I found that kind of remarkable. I think now, having been on boats for a few years, I've become more attuned to that kind of thing. But I was just thinking about the ways in which great change can come to our lives, and we don't realize it at the time, but it's kind of there in our surroundings and environment. And I was thinking about the ways in which nature kind of speaks to us, sometimes even if we're not listening. So this is Obad Before Storm. The momentary calm, having contained all that was and was going to be, gust and breeze, swell tide buried beyond the outer banks, and the fescue, innocent as it appeared, the darkening turn. Had we not been warned? We imagined voices calling to us, light from the fishing boats, tiding fair weather and believe no harm. The sun addressed us through the window, quiet, solemn child. I tried to name you. Memory is not a keeping, but a forgiving, the thresh and burn of what we cannot salvage. And song is merely silence which pierces some relentless resonance. Never is a sky more beautiful than when ready to surrender its fury. Did no one tell us we cannot hold the drenched volume of our world? There's one more poem I'm going to read from this book, but I'm going to save it until the end. So I'm going to read next from Season of Dares, which came out from Bull City Press last fall. A few notes about this book. The cover image is actually a photograph of my grandmother. It was a kind of strange story. As I was thinking about cover images for this book, I had this, I don't know, this thought or this vision of a little girl playing with fire or fireworks or something. So I spent many, many hours late at night scrolling through the internet trying to find some image that kind of fit what I saw in my mind's eye. And then one day, my family was visiting my grandmother in the nursing home, and we were going through some old family photographs. And I found this photograph, and it just kind of stopped me in my tracks because that was exactly what I was looking for. I'll bring it a little closer to the camera so you can see. So this photograph was actually about this big. So I sent it to a lab and had to have it digitized and blown up. And then Ross White at Bowl City Press did this wonderful cover based on that photograph. But this book is very, very special to me. And I'm very thankful to Bowl City Press that they allowed me to incorporate this image. This book is about a lot of things, but as I was thinking about it, I think the main question for this book is, or questions, center on where I'm from or where my story started. So I was born in South Korea and was adopted to the United States at 3 months old. Grew up for the first part of my childhood in the Bitterroot Valley of Montana in a small, small town called Stevensville. And then in high school, we moved to Rifle, Colorado, a slightly bigger, small town on the western slope of Colorado. So I was thinking about questions of relating back to my birth country of Korea, thinking about what it means to be an Asian American person from the rural Western United States. A lot of people don't realize that there are also Asian people that live in the mountains in places like Montana and Colorado. And then thinking about the ways in which those places that I'm from inform and influence who I am today, and thinking about those places kind of as almost like literal soil from which, you know, my poems kind of grow out of, even if they're not directly about the mountains or being adopted or being from Korea, that material still there, kind of underlying it all. So the first poem I'm going to read is When Asked Where I'm Really From. Between two halves of a canyon's split lip, whose namesake the streets sing, all that is holy after opening day of hunting season. Remington, Winchester, Pistol Drive, full of sandstone and gunpowder. No stoplight town, always taking 2 kids at least each year. Pulled under by river snag, by huffing Krylon gold. Accident of gorgeous curve or gunshot. If asked, I'll tell you, not where I'm from, but where I was made, wanting nothing but escape, the only girl who knew how to play, called to accompany wherever there was need. Bye-bye birdie auditions, weddings and Lutheran ladies' Christmas teas. I was a girl who could sight read a melody, but always had trouble keeping time, whose door a mother'd come knocking on in the middle of the night, asking for a song. Self-portrait as Secret Heart of Gold Boy. Never forget your anger, baby, a man once said to me. That's where your power lies. And I mistook this recognition for love, having always wanted to hold the two of them in the same hand. Anger and power, like the boys in the movies I didn't know if I wanted or wanted to be. Busted lip, chip-shouldered boys, Jimmys, Tylers, Keiths, and Codys. Blue jean, black leather, always white. Guitar riffed and bass driven, crowd parting boys swaggering into auto shop, locker room, guts of a flickering mall. Secret heart of gold boys starving for their chance at glory, anointed sun, bud, untapped potential, cooling off on the sidelines after a ref's bad call. Not the good girl I was, back of the ladies' choir bus, bubblegum glossed and glittering like a scream. How I prayed to wake up believed in, deserving, swinging fist the maverick teacher calms just before the credits. I see you. And having been seen, he's therefore transformed. Boy turned endless field, turned stadium at sunset, a burning multitude of men believing their empire will never stop winning. I was listening to, I can't remember if it was an interview or reading where Jericho Brown was talking about his collection, the New Testament, and he was talking about the ways in which the scriptures that he learned as a child has stuck with him all these years. And kind of just pop up during random times during the day when he's doing household chores or mowing the lawn. And that's how some of those scriptures found their way into his poems in the New Testament. And it really struck me because I think that's been the case for me as well. I grew up in a faith tradition where we learned a lot of scripture. I went to tournaments all across the state for Bible memorization. And so a lot of those scriptures have stayed with me in just little bits that keep popping up, and more they kind of infiltrate their ways into my poems. So this is Matthew 19:14. Heaven belongs to such as these, your apostle taught us. So Lord, let me not forget those 6 Julys of girlhood summers down that 2-lane highway, left past the 7-foot plastic Hereford bull at Clearwater Junction, sleeping in cast-off army tents, where 40 miles away might have been a different country. Those faraway towns' names exotic: Phillipsburg, Frenchtown, Wisdom, Shoto. Bless those mouths red with flavor ice, singing rise and shine and give God the glory, glory. As we waited for the mess tent dinner bell, the counselors decreed, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. And we all turned round in line because we believed that one day it'd be true. Lord, forget us not in our hour of need, those who dug Dixie cups from trash bins to tear into visions of the Blessed Virgin, who stole change from Right to Life coin banks to buy ring pops for our little sisters. Bless us, Lord, we dirt road orphans, grown now as we are in miles from the closest home. Girls once named after virtues our mothers hoped we'd hold true. Faith, joy, and daughter after daughter called mercy. All right, I'm going just to read, let's see, 1 or 2 poems from my forthcoming collection. I've been told that there is a sizable delay for the questions, so if you want to start thinking about any questions you might have, or even typing them in, that might be a good idea. I don't know how long the delay is, but I'll see them as they pop up, and hopefully we'll have some after I finish reading these poems. So the first poem I'm going to read is a sonnet. I love sonnets. I've struggled with them for a long time. I think that a lot of my poems, even if they aren't strict sonnets, kind of mirror sonnet structure. So I struggled with this poem that I'm going to read for a long, long time, and I finally just decided to try to put it into sonnet form, and it worked out somewhat, I think. So this is Sonnet in Cold Blood. Hi, June. The colder-blooded among us are seeking shelter. The rat snake coils behind the radiator, harmless. We still don't risk proximity. Neighbors say kill, otherwise he will return, having learned the way in. The first time I was surprised, expecting his blood somehow to be blue, cold as I believed his kind to be. But there it was on the pavement, as red as mine. The next time I did it, his blood was no less red, but I was less surprised. Reader, I want to tell you this ends differently. I want to tell you the snake was only a snake. And the last poem I'm going to read from my forthcoming collection is called Agency, which started out because I was reading somebody else's writing about horses, and this person wrote beautifully about horses, but my husband and I had spent some time on a farm caring for horses, and they are majestic, but they are terrifying. And so I was trying to write a poem about horses, but I was much more fascinated in the kind of visceral fear that they inspired in me than their beauty. So this is kind of the poem that came out of that, thinking about that. Agency. I never cared much for their beauty, but admired how easily the stallions could kill me. My aunt was thrown off a horse at 16. She survived but never looked the same. All traces of the family profile in the cheekbones and chin gone. Now, stumbling from dream and into the field, fists full of peppermints, I plead to the animals, invisible over the hill in the moonless night. I should know by now. It is never about one's skill for finding, but a look-for's willingness to be found. Just as a runaway girl is discovered only a block away, eating dinner at the neighbor's and no further. So her father convinces himself that's all the little girl was capable of, and not what she wanted. But tonight the horses there, down among the beeches, know when I begin to yield, and do not move until I do, turning their heads in the direction of my voice. Before I hear anything, I feel it. Their steeled hooves battering the frozen mud, the valley itself trembling as they rush not toward, but somehow beyond me, halting only when they are close enough to pull me under. All right, while y'all think about your questions, I'm going to read one more poem from my first book. Feel free to ask me anything about poetry, about working on boats, about growing up in Montana, anything that you're interested in, I am excited to talk about. All right, so this last poem was a result of a writing exercise at the Kundiman retreat. Kundiman is a literary organization, an Asian American literary organization that when I first joined as a fellow was just for poets, but now they've branched out into nonfiction and fiction, and they have some student programming as well. It's a really amazing organization. With fellows from all over the country. And so this exercise, for this exercise, we were given a random fact, which was, for me, was 2 million, it takes 2 million trips for a bee going from a flower to the hive to produce 1 pound of honey. And then we had a picture, which for me was of a glacier. And then there was something else that I used to know what it was, but it's embedded in the poem now, so I guess it lives on there. But our charge was to write a poem that incorporated all of these elements. And it was one of the very first poems that I wrote that I was actually happy with. And I think for me, it endures as a testament to the power of poetry in the ways that poetry can make connections across very different ideas and different feelings. And I'm constantly in awe of poetry's ability to do that. This is a nocturne with volcanoes and honey. Tonight the sweetness has no recollection of the garden. No memory of those 2 million hive to flower journeys its laborers require for even 1 pound of honey. It is forgetting the irises in cosmos, dirt and root, finds impossible to trace the quadrille of drone in wax catacomb, refuses to name each pollen spore and sepal, weightless with solitude. This teaspoon of a countless world stirred and dissolved the having been and lost. Each year, 50 to 70 volcanoes erupt around the world, not only the St. Helens and Pompeii's, but also the nameless and submerged. Earth upheaved and churning itself, anonymous crescents, then islands, then atlases of blooms. All right. I'll wait for a couple more minutes if there's questions. Please don't be shy. I think I know all of you who are here at this reading, so please don't be shy to ask something. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? I'm currently working on an anthology of Asian American poets writing about faith and spirituality with my fellow poet Lee Herrick, and we just signed a contract for that with Orison Books, so that that book is scheduled to come out in spring of 2020. We really have some amazing writers. Lee Young Lee will be in it. Tina Chang, Joseph Legaspi, Sarah Gambito. Oh, there's so many. I'm just trying to like remember all of them. Who else? We have Marcy Calabretta Canciobello is in it, another adoptee poet. You should check it out. We recently sent out an announcement, and there'll be more information coming about that shortly. Something else to look forward to. And I guess if there's no question, let's see. All right, I see one question from Anna. Thank you. So Arabilis. Oh, where do I start with that? Arabilis has been a work in progress for a long, long time, and some of the poems that are in that book come from these two books. It's kind of a melding of the concerns of those two books, plus some of the other things I was thinking about. The title came from my editor at Bull City, Leslie Sains. She's amazing and brilliant. Arabilis has to do, the Latin word comes from the same root that our word arable comes from. So it's like land that can be plowed, that can be made fertile. So again, tying into these questions of fromness, or as my friend poet Nabila Lovelace says, which I think is amazing, the fraughtness of fromness. So it deals with those questions of where am I from? What do those places mean to me? As well as you will notice throughout the book, and I noticed as I was putting the book together, not necessarily as I was writing it, that there's a lot of poems about dead animals and suffering animals. Toward the end, as I was putting the poems in the final order, I felt a little anxious because it seemed like so much of the book was focusing on these animals. But then I kind of realized that talking about suffering in that way was a way for me to deal with some of the loss and the trauma and violence, human violence, that we've been witnessing in recent years. And it was a way of thinking about our role and possibly implication in these acts of violence in a way that allowed me to breathe a little bit more air into the room, I suppose, if that makes sense. I was thinking a lot about the ways in which we tend to anthropomorphize animals. Some animals, like we anthropomorphize, dogs and cats, but do we necessarily anthropomorphize worms or mosquitoes? And what does that mean? What does that say about our own humanity and the ways in which we think about life and death and trauma and justice? So that's a lot. But that's Arabilis. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, and I'm hoping that as the book kind of lives out in the world, I'm better able to figure out what it's really about. I think that sometimes we write things and don't realize really until later the full dimensions, if ever we realize the full dimensions about of what they're saying, even to the people who write them. All right. Well, thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate seeing you all. Tune in for the next Poets in Pajamas reading series. I love this reading series. I love how it makes accessible. It's accessible to people no matter where they are. And as somebody who travels a lot and can't always be in a physical place for a reading, it's amazing. I love it. So actually I see more questions here. I'm going just to take these real quick. Let's see. Rachel asks, can you talk a little bit about your process in putting together collections of poems, both chapbooks and full length? Questions to ask yourself. Wow. I feel like I still don't really understand. I do a lot of it by feel, to be perfectly honest. So the first Anemochory I put together myself, and the publisher wanted to have it exactly as it was submitted. So it kind of lived on as I initially conceived of it. Whereas Season of Dares, I worked very closely with my editor on the ordering. And my editor brought a lot of different questions to the book than I did. She thought a lot about, for example, she thought a lot more about form than I did. Poems and couplets by, I think there were several poems and couplets, and for some reason they were all back to back. So she was curious about the effect of juxtaposing poem and couplets, poem and tercets. So those were questions that she brought to my mind that I wasn't even thinking of. But in general, I just spend a lot of time with the poems and just kind of read them aloud and see what feels right. I know that's not very helpful, but that's kind of the ordering. And in terms of chapbook and full length, I think that for both Season of Dares and Anemochory, I felt like I didn't feel like I could sit down and make a full book at once. I know that writers work differently all the time. Some writers have a vision for a full-length book and they just write it from start to finish, but I felt like I needed to chunk down things small. And so, especially with Season of Dares, I felt like the poems in this book really spoke specifically to my childhood memories, faith, growing up in a rural town. So I felt like that is where I wanted to start with this book, and then it expanded in my full-length book later. But for me, that was key, was just identifying some themes and being able to write about those and group those poems together and see how they spoke to each other before putting them in conversation with other poems in a longer collection. So my dad asked, did your rural upbringing help with your poetry? It did. It did in a lot of ways. I think one of the main ways it helped, when I was a kid, I was much more of an indoor cat. When we went camping, you would see me in the camper with a book. I didn't really like the outdoors, even though I'm glad that my parents now exposed me to camping and hiking and swimming in the river and all of these wonderful things, because I think through growing up the way I did in the forest, in the mountains, made me attuned to the ways in which nature speaks to us. And the ways in which we can kind of see ourselves in nature, if that makes sense. And I think too, giving me a lot of ways to talk about things like with Season of Dares, thinking about grief and loss, but expanding it beyond a specific instance of loss in my life and tying it into kind of the cycles of rebirth and loss that are present in nature, was an easier way for me to process and digest my personal losses. Let me just make sure I think that's the last question. So thank you all again for joining me, and join you next time. Thanks.